This is a Monty moment. I'm Johnny Montalbano, getting you ready for week 2 of the college football season. But before we look ahead to this week's slate of games, just a quick flashback to week 1 and a couple of storylines that I take out of it. Number 1, it was not a good Saturday for the Pac 12. You had number 11 Oregon not only falling to number 3 Georgia, but getting absolutely destroyed 49-3 in a game where it looked like, the big question mark was how is Georgia going to rebound off of losing so many starters to the NFL. Well, if anything, they look almost even better than they did last year, and that's pretty scary to score 7 touchdowns, something they didn't really even do last year, and that's a scary proposition down there in Atlanta. So, not a good start for Oregon's perspective. Also, how about number 7 Utah falling late in Gainesville to the Florida Gators, 29-26. So the discussion of a Pac-12 team possibly being represented in the college football playoff, well, it kind of goes out the door already unless, we see some other upsets along the way and those teams rebound, or maybe does USC take a major step up? I don't see it. So not a good start for the Pac-12 last Saturday. Number 2, Notre Dame to me did their job. Now, of course, they didn't win, but you know what? They were in the game throughout. It was only a one-score game against number 2 Ohio State late in the fourth quarter before the Buckeyes were able to add on a critical insurance touchdown. But if you're the Fighting Irish and if you're a fan like I am, I think you have to be proud of the effort that they put in, because in years past, that's a game where Notre Dame against a top-ranked team on the road in prime time loses big. And you know what? Kudos to Marcus Freeman and his crew. And I'll say this, if you're an Irish fan, there's still a path to the college football playoff. If you look at their schedule, they do take on the ACC favorite Clemson Tigers later on in the year. They do have USC later on in the year. So if you run the schedule here and win out and pretty convincingly, I think you have a chance to get that 4th spot, because I don't know right now when you look at the rest of the teams in the top 25 outside of Alabama and Ohio State, and I'll say Georgia too. Who else is going to do it? Is Clemson really going to be that? I think they're probably going to run the table in the ACC, but I'll tell you, I looked at their game Monday night, and for most of that game, they weren't that impressive until they pulled it away late. I still think you have a lot of question marks at quarterback there with the Tigers, but I think there's a good chance here for the Irish. If they run the table throughout, they have Clemson later on in the year. I think you've got a shot to get back into the playoff discussion. So I think Notre Dame did their job. That would be storyline number 2. And number 3, some of the crazy endings that we saw in week number 1. You had the backyard brawl last Thursday between West Virginia and Pittsburgh, where Pittsburgh pulls it out late, 38-31. You had North Carolina and Appalachian State put on a flurry late in the fourth quarter, and the Tar Heels come out with a 63-61 win late in that one, as App State missed a 2-point conversion at the end there that would have made this game even crazier than it already was. An instant classic, almost a Game of the Year nominee there. And also number 24, Houston had a rally late against UTSA just to get it into overtime, and then the game goes 3 OTs, and number 24, Houston, who I picked as maybe one of the outsiders that could be like this year's Cincinnati, and they had a rally late, and unfortunately that's not a good sign when you're down 2 scores to UTSA, but they made a great comeback to get into overtime and winning in 3 overtimes there as well. So some crazy endings. What a wild first official week of the college football season. So as a result of all this craziness, you had some changes into the top 25. You had number 3 Georgia and number 2 Ohio State switched. So now the Bulldogs number 2, the Buckeyes number 3. Also, Michigan and Clemson flip-flopped in the top 25. So now the Wolverines are 4, the Tigers are 5. And the Florida Gators, with that big upset over number 7 Utah, went from unranked to number 12. And, I liked the Gators last week in my picks. And when we get to our picks here in just a second, I think I'm gonna roll with them. And this is a pretty cool sign what you're seeing down there in Florida. But that's what's going on. That's what I look back at week number 1. Now, looking ahead to this upcoming full Saturday slate of games, this usually is the case in week 2 in college football. The top teams usually, coming off that big week, not really playing anybody special. I mean, you look at the top ranked teams here. You have number 1 Alabama traveling to Texas, and anywhere from a 19.5 to a 21-point favorite. I don't think this game is going to be close. I think it sounds interesting that they're going to be on the road playing at high noon there again in Texas, but the Crimson Tide just way too good there. I think they pull away easily. And you look at all these other matchups early on. Number 2 Georgia hosts Stanford. Number 3 Ohio State is home to Arkansas State. Number 4, Michigan hosts Hawaii. Number 5, Clemson will take on Furman. And then you have number 6, Texas A&M taking on App State. Number 7, Oklahoma is home to Kent State. Number 8, Notre Dame will have their home opener against Marshall. And then you've also got USC on the road to take on Stanford. That could be kind of interesting there out west. But number 11, Oklahoma State is home to Arizona State. Number 14, Michigan State home to Akron. Number 15, Miami of Florida will host Southern Miss. An interesting one down here locally in the South Carolina state is the Gamecocks travel to number 16, Arkansas, who beat number 23rd, previously 23rd ranked Cincinnati last week. Number 18, NC State will host Charleston Southern. Number 19, Wisconsin home to Washington State. You've got number 22, Ole Miss against Central Arkansas. Number 23, Wake Forest takes on Vanderbilt. But when I take a look at my picks here, as I look ahead to giving you 3 games this week, they are the ones that are, again, with ranked opponents. There are 3 games with ranked opponents playing each other, and the reason why I'm picking these games are some of the lines in these matchups, because some of them surprise me a little bit. And as we get to the official picks here for week number 2, last week I opened up 2-1. I won with number 3, Georgia, laying 17 to Oregon, and Georgia, of course, won big 49-3. I lost with number 2, Ohio State. They were laying 17 against Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was able to hold it to within 11. And also, I won with Florida upsetting number 7 previously, Utah. So 2-1 to start as we head into this week's slate of games. And as I said, the 3 games with ranked opponents are the ones I'm going with, just because really not only the matchups but the lines in this one. And the first one to look at 3:30 Eastern on Saturday is number 24 Tennessee traveling to Pittsburgh to take on number 17 Pittsburgh. And number 24 Tennessee is a 6.5-point favorite. And I got to tell you, when I'm watching that backyard brawl game last week, Kadon Slovis, who was the former USC quarterback who transferred, great debut with Pittsburgh. 308 yards and a touchdown against a team in West Virginia that had the 3rd best pass defense last season in the Big 12. And speaking of pass defense, not the strong suit for Tennessee. It allowed the 2nd most yards in the air in the SEC last season. And don't forget, they also lost their best defensive back, Alante Taylor, to the draft. So I'm looking at all that. I'm looking at the way that Pittsburgh played last year, and Pittsburgh's getting 6.5 points. I mean, to me, I don't know how you don't take Pittsburgh in that spot, and I will definitely take them. I think they can win this game in somewhat of an up, if you look at it as an upset. But you're telling me they're getting 6.5 points? I'll definitely run with that. So give me Pittsburgh, number 17 Pittsburgh plus 6.5 in game number 1. Game number 2, in another matchup of top 25 ranked teams, number 20 Kentucky travels to Gainesville to take on the 12th ranked Florida Gators. And the Gators are favored by 5.5. And I'll say this, when you look at this, Kentucky's becoming a football school, folks. I mean, you look at it, the Wildcats last season went 10-3. They were 5-3 in an SEC that's very, very tough. So you know what? They're definitely becoming a football school. And if Kentucky can get their running game going and control the tempo down there, then this might be a different outcome. But if you look at last week, the Kentucky running game, it didn't go anywhere, really. The offensive line had issues keeping the backfield clean. And I don't think when you look at this matchup that their offense is going to be any different than what Utah's was. And you look at Gators quarterback Anthony Richardson, who did it both in the air and on the ground. He's very athletic. He's very mechanical. I think he's somebody you're going to be hearing a lot of as we head towards the NFL draft. And I think the run is going to be a big difference in this game. And it may take a while if you are betting this game. Of course, do it wisely. But if you are, I think you're going to be sweating this one throughout. But I'm going to take the Gators to win and cover, and I think they'll pull away late. So I'm going to take Florida to laying 5.5 to win and cover in game number 2. Game number 3, you go out west, a little late night football, and this is a cool one. Number 9 Baylor travels to number 21 BYU, and the reason why I'm taking this one is the line. Now, some of the lines have this one varied. The one that I'm going off of has the Baylor Bears favored by 4. And to me, these two teams are evenly matched. If you look at their games last week, the Bears posted 573 total yards in their opener, and the BYU Cougars 575. So when I look at these teams, then I'm like, all right, let's look at their rosters. And doing some research, the difference that I found in this game might come down to experience. So these two faced each other last season, and Baylor came out on top 38-24. But the Bears lost their top two running backs, their top three receivers, and two top safeties and corners from last year's team. Meanwhile, BYU is returning most of their production from 2021. So this will likely come, if you take it on experience, you're going to go with BYU. But to me, this is going to come down to a field goal. And while Baylor might prevail in this one, I'm going to grab the 4 with BYU in what should be a late night thriller. And I could definitely even see BYU pulling this one out. So give me the BYU Cougars to cover the 4. So 3 picks for week number 2. I'm going to take Pittsburgh plus 6.5 over Tennessee. I'm going to take 12th ranked Florida laying 5.5 against number 20 Kentucky. And I'm going to take BYU plus 4 against Baylor in 3 matchups involving top 25 teams in week 2. And we'll see if we can keep this 2-1 start. We can build up that 2-1 start and maybe at least get another 2-1, if not 3-0 here in week number 2. And what should be those 3 games, probably the most thrilling games of the weekend in college football. For more, like us on Facebook and Twitter at GameOnETB, and you can follow me on Twitter at Montalbano NY. This has been a Monty moment for week 2 in college football, and I'm Johnny Montalbano.